Well, I think anytime from the first game to the second game, the most we're concerned about as coaches, the most important thing we're concerned about as coaches is how much can we improve? How much can we improve our team? Because as fans, maybe you look at it like, well, we gained this many yards, we did this well on third down, we didn't give up that many points, we scored a lot of points. But as a coach, you look at potential areas of exposure based on things not being done correctly. Whether they were taken advantage of or not really is not what you're concerned about. So even though we were pleased with the intensity that we competed with in the game and did a great job coming out early in the game and establishing a great offensive tempo and settled down on defense and played a little better and got a lot of people to play, got some experience to some young guys at very critical positions, whether it's, punter, kicker, in the secondary, new guys starting, right tackle. I mean, you know them all. That's all great, but now the focus needs to be on improving, making progress, seeing areas where there are issues created where you don't do things correctly. And I think that's really what our focus is for this week. We had some outstanding performances. Julio and Trent, we felt, played great. Mark Barron on defense. Chris Jordan did a really good job on special teams, as did Cade Foster, not just in the 4, kicking attempts that he had, field goals or extra points, but did a really good job of kicking off and doing a good job as a coverage guy, on the kickoff. Questions may come up a little bit about Marcel Darius. Let me just tell you where we're at on all that. I said that we would appeal, but when I say things like that, we have to have precedent to appeal. Precedent being some other case, some other circumstance relative to how, penalties are sort of granted. And we don't really feel like we have a good precedent. We feel like, relative to the circumstance, this was pretty fair. There were some other cases that we were looking at, but we really don't have precedent to do it. And, we're always going to protect our players. We're always going to go the extra mile to try to help them, to benefit them. But in this case, we really don't feel like there's precedent to make an appeal. So that issue is really dead. From an injury standpoint, we talked about Courtney Upshaw in terms of his ankle. He's probably going to be out today. We're hopeful that he'll be able to practice tomorrow, even though he'll be out on the field. DJ Fluker, who we didn't feel like he had that serious of an injury after the game, had a little more swelling and a few more problems, so he'll be very limited in practice today and do very little in practice today, but we also feel like he should be able to practice tomorrow. I know you're going to ask me about Mark and Wesley Neighbors, but let me just say this. All right, Mark is going to, both of these guys are sort of in the same boat, but they're both going to start some dry land rehab today. Every rehab and every step of the way when you come back from this has to be evaluated in 12 to 24 hours as to how you react to that. So it's going to be a day-to-day basis as to whether he can take the next step and the next step and the next step. And you can ask me, but I don't know if he'll be able to play in this game. All right, it depends on how he reacts to every day. And nobody really knows how that's going to be. And it would probably be a little bit of a stretch for everything to go perfectly, but that's where it is. And that's all anybody knows right now, so that's all anybody can say. So I'm not making any predictions or any hypothetical situations or whatever. That's just the way it is. So, this is going to be a great matchup of two, really sort of prestige programs, Penn State coming here to visit us, and ESPN and Game Day and all that's going to make a great atmosphere. Our fans always contribute their part to having a great atmosphere. But, one thing when you play Joe Paterno coach teams, which we've had some experience doing. They do a great job of executing. They don't give you much. They really kind of win on effort, toughness, and execution and discipline. And I don't think this team is any different. They were very impressive, last week in beating Youngstown State. They have established systems on offense, defense, and special teams that their players really understand and do a good job of executing. They have a great runner in Royster who has been there for several years and probably may end up being the all-time leading rusher in Penn State history. I think they have great size and speed at receiver, probably unique to what we're used to seeing in terms of the size receivers that they have. You can say they have a freshman quarterback playing, but he sure didn't play like a freshman last week. Played extremely well, very poised, good passer, very athletic and accurate. And their defense is very quick. And again, size, good pass rushers at defensive end, explosive, quick guys interior, very fast, instinctive linebackers, and 3 out of 4 starters coming back in the secondary. And special teams-wise, they were very impressive with a kickoff return for a touchdown last week and sort of dominated the game in special teams last week. So, this is a good overall, all-around team that doesn't give you much, that we're certainly going to have to bring our A game to be able to do a good job against them.
Nick, Coach Paterno went through a couple of tough years in 03 and 04, a couple of losing seasons. People were saying he was too old, the game has passed him by. Looking back, how unfair was that criticism first? And the second question would be, do you envision yourself coaching when you're 83 years old?
Let me answer the second one first. That's pretty easy. I don't think so. I have a tremendous amount of respect for guys like Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden, who have, done this for so long and been extremely consistent in the way they do it and the product that they're able to year after year after year. I think consistency in performance is the most difficult thing to sort of manufacture, in anything that you do. Other than those few years that you mentioned, and I always had a great admiration for Joe and didn't think he should be getting criticized like he did at that time. But you see part of the reason that he has functioned for so long and been so successful is they made the adjustments that they needed to make, whether it was how they recruited, the systems that they played on offense, defense, or whatever, and got back very quickly to being one of the dominant teams in the country. And, these guys are a good football team now. They got a lot of good players, and they won 11 games last year. And they got a lot of good players back from that team, beat LSU in a bowl game. So this is a very good team.
Coach, how has Trent Richardson stepped into the leadership role that's associated with being a starting running back?
Well, Trent's always been one of the guys that's on the leadership council around here. Really doesn't have anything to do with being a starter. I think he's that kind of person. He's got a lot of competitive character. He's really a good, makes a lot of good choices and decisions about what he does. He sets a great example for other people. He's caring. He'll engage and inspires with his example. So he's always been a leader on our team, especially this year, regardless of whether he starts or not. So he's done extremely well.
Coach, I've heard it described, I remember asking some of the coaches last year at the national championship about their coaching style, and they said it was kind of like going through a lunch line, that you take a little bit from different coaches you come in contact with. I was wondering if growing up in the coaching profession, if you took anything from Coach Paterno, and if not him, who did you take something from?
Well, I think that the people that you have direct contact with, whether it was Don James, my coach, when I played in college, who was a very successful coach in his own career, my high school coach, Bill Belichick, the people that you work for, you have a better opportunity. George Perlis at Michigan State, guys that have been successful for a reason. But I think the one thing that you take from guys like Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden, is not only are they good and have been good for a long time, they've also been great ambassadors for the game, and they've done what they do in a really classy way. They don't talk about other people. They don't run other programs down. They just sort of do it in a first-class way. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've tried to emulate from, Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden, those kinds of guys, is because of how they've done what they do, the kind of people they are, the kind of character they have. And I think that's important for college football. I think it's an important part of the integrity of the game.
Just wondering, after looking at tape, how you would grade out the secondary in their first outing?
Well, we had some good things and some bad things, and we had some guys that played pretty well, and we've got some guys that need to play better. We made too many mental errors in some cases, and we need to do a better job of consistent execution. And that's something that we're going to have to continue to work on, and that's an area that it would help if we can make a significant improvement, in this week. I think it's, last week we prepared for a lot of things that we didn't see, and we saw some things we didn't prepare for. So I think that inexperienced groups would probably be affected by that a little bit more. Hopefully, at least we have a body of work and a system, this week that we can sort of prepare our players for, and pretty much know we're going to get some wrinkle somewhere along the line, but most of what they're going to practice and see is probably what they're going to see in a game.
That's kind of connected to that. What did you think about Penn State's quarterback, first game out, and how he fared? Played
really well. You'd never know he was a freshman, that's for sure. He's got a very good arm. He's very accurate. Had a lot of poise. They didn't have any game management issues, fumbled snaps, delay of games. A guy hard counts like a veteran, draws the other team off sides. Didn't make really any bad decisions, stood in the pocket, took a couple licks and completed balls. Hard to believe that the guy's a freshman, watching him play in last week's game.
And another question. I know Trent had big game experience, so maybe that wasn't an issue with him, but to get him and guys who played in Darius's place, get him some game action and a starting role before a big game like this, does that help them be more prepared for when the stage is a little bit bigger?
Well, I think that anytime guys that haven't played get the opportunity to go out and play in a game-like situation, there's obviously things that are going to help them grow and mature, and that experience is going to be beneficial. But, that's sort of a work in progress. Every game that you play, you're going to get a little bit better from that standpoint. And, hopefully, our guys that didn't have a lot of experience will benefit from the game experience they have, but I think that will continue to build as the season progresses.
Hey, Coach, it's a two-part question. First, you were able to get A.J. McCarron into the game pretty early and pretty often Saturday, different week, different opponent. Does it go back to kind of a more traditional Greg number one backup kind of watches this week, or is there a possibility A.J. could get
Well, we don't have a quarterback situation here. We don't have a quarterback controversy. There was a reason and a purpose for what we did last week, and that's over and done with. The reason and the purpose was that A.J. had never played in a game. He's a very capable guy. He's going to be a very good player here. He's a great sort of guy to have in the position that he's in right now, but he needed to get game experience. And we had total faith, trust, and confidence in putting him in the game regardless of what the situation was. We were going to put him in the second quarter so he could play, regardless of what the situation was. If the game would have been 7-7, we were going to put him in the game for 2 series in the second quarter. And I have every faith, trust, and confidence in the guy that he'll go do the job and do what he's supposed to do. But he needed to do that, because if down the road or even in this game, if something happens to Greg and he has to play, it's not going to be the first time that he ever played. So that was a plan, for him, and that doesn't need to be the plan this week. Greg played 13 for 15 for however many yards he made, and one of those balls were kind of dropped on the sidelines or bobbled out of bounds, and the other one was one poor read, or it had been 15 for 15. So we're not really looking to create anything but some experience for the backup guy, so that if he has to play, he'll be able to do it. And he learned a lot in the game. I mean, he didn't play slow right at the end of the game when we were trying to milk the clock. All right, that if it was a real game and you didn't want to give him the ball back, that would be important. He didn't kneel down on the ball right at the end of the game, which, so we had to kneel down on it again. Snap the ball with 12 seconds on the clock. But that's being a young'un, and that's why, you put them in there and give them experience, and they learn, that kind of stuff.
And the follow-up, and you sort of addressed it, but did Greg show you that, now that he's a senior, now that he's had a year, did you see a different Greg McElroy in
Well, I think he's been different all through camp. I think he's had a really good camp. He's more confident. I think his arm has gotten a little bit stronger. He's confident in making throws that I don't think he was confident in making a year ago, and I think that's all going to benefit us in being able to utilize, the skilled players that we have.
Coach, you had an opportunity to see Penn State as an assistant in the 70s and 80s, and then at Michigan State in the 90s, and now you're playing for them again this year. Has there been any changes, or are you noticing some of the same things?
Oh, they made changes through the years, and they made changes from last year to this year. A lot of it's based on personnel, some of it in the kicking game in terms of system, but one thing remains the same. They play with a lot of discipline. They play guys that will go out and execute and do their job and not make foolish mistakes or get foolish penalties. And I think they've proven over time that they know how to win in terms of their players, and it's because they are basically a very sound fundamental team in their approach, and they execute what they do. It's not all about fooling you all the time. It's about, this is what we do, so what are you going to do to stop it? And they're pretty good at it.
Hey, Coach, I know the game's here in Tuscaloosa, but growing up from West Virginia and stuff, did you have any feelings toward Penn State? Did you ever see them when you were growing up or anything in action?
Oh, yeah. They used to play West Virginia all the time, and that was a big game. And I went to it when I was a kid. And I don't remember how old I was, but I remember, well, I'm 58. He's been there 45 years, so I had to be at least 13, I guess. But I remember Joe Paterno leading the team out, and we didn't win many of those. I don't know if we ever won any when I was growing up in West Virginia. I was rooting for the Mountaineers, but it was always the big game to see Penn State.
Coach Paterno actually played 2 quarterbacks. A second freshman got in the game late last week. Obviously, Bolden is the primary focus, but does the other freshman who battled for that job all the way through the preseason occupy any of your preparation time? And if so, how much more difficult does that make things?
Well, it's, the guy went in the game when it was 37-7. So, and they didn't do really anything different with him in the game. He played some last year. He is a good runner, but I think both guys are capable of running. So they do have quarterback runs, and I think they would do them with both of them. So I don't think they have 2 different offenses is what I'm trying to say. And if they did, they didn't unveil it at 37-7. So And our whole purpose of putting A.J. in was so they'd have two different quarterbacks to prepare against, but we didn't do anything different with either one of them in there. So what matters? What's the difference? I mean, you give us too much credit. I don't think our players are capable of.
What was it initially about the Darius decision, 2-game suspension, that you thought was too much? And as an impact player,
There
how
was
much
nothing.
will
I
it
never
be?
said it was too much. I just said that, we will appeal it if we think there's precedent to appeal it. And when we researched it, we didn't feel that there was any precedent to appeal it. So, I wish it was less. But when you look at the facts, you have to say, is there any other case that would say that he got an unfair punishment? Even though I may think that I wish it was less as a coach, for him as a player, and for our team, that doesn't mean that when you look at the case precedent of what's been done in the past, that he got treated unfairly. And when that was done, we didn't feel like there was a precedent for an appeal.
And also, what do you need to see out of Mark Ingram this week in order for him to play?
Well, we just need to see him be able to be himself, be 100%, be able to practice enough to be confident and ready. But I'm not anticipating that that's going to happen. I'm anticipating Mark making progress every day, and that we're going to evaluate his progress on a daily basis. And whenever he's ready to play, when he's practiced enough, and he's confident, and he's fully recovered, and the doctors clear him to play because he won't have any future issues, then we'll make a decision to play him. And that decision hasn't been made. So to ask me hypothetical, what do I have to see? I have to see Mark Ingram be Mark Ingram.